Monsieur Anber.
Mr. Cassavin, good evening to you, sir. It's been 14 days since I've seen you.
That's right. It's been 14 days, and I have the rival mug as well this evening. For those of you who may not have seen the news, we were on the first ever hiatus of the Calling Russ Anber podcast last week. I was on a bit of a vacation, unavailable, and you were, of course, extremely busy, and we'll get to that in the Lomachenko fight throughout the next 45 minutes or so. We got the Tank Davis fight over the past weekend, some news and notes in the boxing world, no shortage of topics. So thank you once again for tuning in. But yes, it was a while, Russ. First time since we started this adventure in November of last year of 2020 that we had a week off. But we're back at it, and you're back in the basement, I see, although not just for the recording, but for the time being, probably your last quarantine for the foreseeable future.
Boy, I hope so. Enough of this. July 5th can't come quick enough, but for these new regulations to come in. But, it's funny you mentioned that. I think I've been a good soldier. You know what I mean? I think I've done my part for society and to humanity. And since August of last year, I've counted, this will make 2 months and 2 weeks. So a total of 10 weeks that I have spent in quarantine since August of last year. So not even a year. I've wasted more than 2.5 months of my life in my basement, abiding by the rules of COVID and Canadian government regulations. And being in March, being in Moscow was one sense of freedom. But these past couple of weeks in LA and then in Vegas, in which, unless you reminded yourself, that there was COVID and that you had your mask or whatever, it was business as usual. Like it was back to
So the bubble is over. No more bubble in the top ranked bubble that was around for a while in Vegas. That's done.
No more bubble, no more restrictions. They tested you on the day of the weigh-in, which was good. So we all got our test, but I think that was more done to be able to satisfy all the people that would be traveling after the fight so that they would have their COVID test so they could leave the country. But literally, like, zero restrictions, eat where you want, go out where you want, coming back, go as you please. As you know, I went to the hockey game when I was there with Vegas and Canadians, Game 5, 20,000 people to capacity. A couple of months ago, we had, 73,000 at Arlington Stadium for the Canelo Billy Joe Saunders fight. Loma fight had something like a 33,000 or 3,500 capacity, and it was packed to the rafters, 3,500 people, in there. When I think that there's only 3,500 people at the Bell Center, for a hockey game, I mean, I just don't get it. I wish it seems to me that it would be so easy if somebody from the government or from the health department would come on a call or a television or whatever and say, this is why we do it. But I don't believe they have the answers as to this is why we do it. I don't believe they have the answers, and they're just doing whatever they want to do and making the rules up as they go along, regardless of any logic that it may imply. So hopefully now the vaccination's done and July 5th, no more restrictions on mandatory travelers coming back in with their double vaccination. They can no more quarantine. It's about time.
And you'll be on the road again for probably a few more fights this summer, right? So that's one of the good reasons as well of being busy and being able to go to these fights without having to worry about the quarantine. Correct. Once you get back to Canada and Montreal. And for the Lomachenko fight of this past weekend, what a fight it was, what a performance it was. You mentioned the 3,500 fans in attendance. It was also, I believe, in rare or one of the hotels that they don't usually use in Vegas, right? One of the newer hotels, or how was that experience from the setup?
It's not a new hotel. It's a newly owned hotel. I've been there before. Okay. It's the former Hard Rock. It's on Hard Rock Drive. It's a former Hard Rock hotel, and now it's Virgin, Richard Branson's Virgin company. Now they did a little remodel of the place. Very nice, beautiful theater where we had the fights. Great venue. I can't tell you why, but clearly there must have been a switch because of a deal that was reached. I know one of the things that was the major difference, but I guess that's because of the fact that there was no bubble. But one of the agreements that appeared to have been reached with Top Rank and the hotel was that our per diem was on our hotel room. So we were allotted a certain amount of money per day for our meals. And nicely enough, it carried over to the next day. So for example, if you didn't use all your per diem that was scheduled on the Thursday, well, it got carried over to the Friday, you know, which was good. You know, they didn't just say, here's your flat rate. If you don't use it, too bad. So that was kind of fair that they did that. But yeah, great venue, you know, great fight, easy access, hotels. It was busy. I mean, I could see where something like that, though, could be problematic in the future, because as the hotels start to fill up and during the peak hours of eating and whatnot, it did become a little difficult to eat in the few restaurants that are available where you could eat, you know, something good and nutritious. That became a little bit of a problem. But well, yeah, great to be back in the venue.
Not a big problem in context with what everything is going on, but I understand the situation. And let's get to the fight, though, Russ, and the performance from Lomachenko. Because going in, we knew the storyline was, and from Loma's camp, they were honest as well, right? People talked after the Lopez fight at one point, some considered with Loma, with all of his accomplishments, what he's done in his amateur career, his Olympic career, and in the professional ranks, maybe he doesn't need to do this anymore. And not only does he come back as a lightweight, so at 135, fights a live contender, Nakatani, a difficult opponent that even Teofimo Lopez was not able to knock out. And Loma delivers probably one of his best performances of his professional career, if not the best performance. And you had a big impact on it. We'll get to the cut. We'll get to all of it. But I think that if you had any expectations of what the Loma fight was going to be prior to the actual fight against Nakatani in the ring, he exceeded any expectations people could have had. He showed why he's still a dominant fighter and one of the pound-for-pound best.
You know, it bothered me a lot, Matt, and I had spoken to you about this earlier, and I think we discussed this with Scully. It bothered me a lot how people quickly wrote Loma off after a very close fight that many, many people, great boxing people, had as a draw. Wrote Loma off as if, you know, he plummets from number 1 to number 22 in the pound for pound list, you know, like on a close loss like this to Teofimo Lopez, like suddenly all the stuff that made him a great pound for pound fighter, which once again proves that people have no idea what pound for pound means. But all of a sudden, his skills have he suffered a loss. Skills are no more good. Talent's no more good. Speed's no more good. Defense no more good. Technique's no more good. No more pound for pound. Insane way of thinking. Okay, so I told you that this would have to be a statement fight, though. This would have to be a fight to prove that he belongs among the big boys. And when I say big, I mean it was evident. And I just happened to watch the replay before we did this. And ding, the bell rings, and out comes Nakatani. And it's like you're watching two guys with 3 weight classes difference between them. You know, like it was crazy, the size difference. I mean, even live, it was crazy. When they went to the weigh-in, I don't know if you were either the weigh-in or the press conference, when Loma put his hand on his shoulders. You know,
the final press conference, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just so big, right?
Any idea of the weights on the actual night of the fight? Any idea?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No,
but
I
clearly,
don't.
they're the height and reach advantage, and the size. It was a big.
The size just immense, you know. And Loma proved that he can hang in there with the big boys. Now, if I tell you what, if he could punch like the big boys, Nakatani might have been out of there even sooner. You know, it takes Loma a little bit longer. But if Loma, with his size, had, let's say, Teofimo's punching power, they'd all be gone earlier. You know what I mean? So sometimes you can't have everything. But you know, it was supposed to be a statement fight. It was the fight to prove he deserved the rematch. It was the fight to prove that he belonged. It was the fight to prove that all the haters, all the naysayers who wrote him off after the loss to Lopez were wrong. And I think he delivered on that in spades.
And you talked about the preparation for this fight 2 weeks ago when you were in Vegas. We had the podcast on with Scully, and you were saying that his conditioning, he was still treating the training camp as seriously as ever before for this fight. not at all with the kind of mentality that we've seen in the past of other fighters who, when they lose the belt, or they've already had accomplishments, they're kind of going through the motions. They're still doing it, but not with the same intensity they once did in the primes of their career. But to me, Loma, with that type of performance against Nakatani, and I don't know if you saw it in the preparation even leading up to the fight, Russ, but he really seemed to be at a focus where he still wants to do this. He's still, and I don't know, what do you think there's any added motivation possibly wanting to prove the doubters wrong? Is that because that's never really something he had to experience unless you consider the loss to Salido when he wanted to fight and people said maybe he wasn't as good as we thought because he lost to Salido in his second pro fight?
Look, I think the guy hates to lose. You know, he hasn't done it he hasn't lost very often in his life. He's never seen the other guy's hand raised. I think this might be the third time in his career. Lopez was, I think, the third time combined in his amateur and pro career that he's seen the opponent's hand raised. So the guy certainly doesn't like to lose. Of course, there's a sense of motivation. But what I think I noticed in this was how good a mood he was in. And when he's in a good mood, and I remember in a training camp years ago when he said to me, Russ, I can train 24 hours a day. That's how much he loves it, okay? He's not bothered by that. He's not bothered by the hard work. So when you give him the hard work, plus he's happy, injury-free, all of that adds up to confidence. His training is fantastic. He's so good. He's at a level that in my 42 years in the game, I can't say that I've seen other fighters able to do what he does in preparation for a fight, and how he can run. He can find fifth gear very early in a fight and still have more in the gearbox as we go on later. Because if you look at a lot of his fights where he has broken guys down, he is punching more, faster, and harder later in the fight than he was in the beginning. It's really remarkable what this guy can do. And that's why, I know he's been hampered by injuries. There's things that have bothered him, but boy, it certainly didn't this time. And he really showed it. When he's a happy, confident guy, tough to beat.
But it's great that you brought up this point, because I think we talk about many times in boxing how much the mental side of the game is as important as anything else. And maybe the confidence in the mood, is that something you had a chance to discuss with him afterwards, or with Papachenko, his father and trainer? Because in the lead up to the Lopez fight, he didn't seem in a good mood at all. Now, maybe some of that was to, try to get into the head of Lopez. I don't know. But the mood and the confidence, if you try to say, listen, this is the type of attitude we got to keep now. Remember this moment here. We got to try to bring that attitude back if we get to the rematch or we get to another big fight down the road. Because to me, the moods were looked a lot different, at least publicly, from this fight than it did in the first Lopez fight.
But we found out after, which I didn't know until after, we found out after why he was in that mood, if you will, or what was wrong going into the Lopez fight. They had the injury to the shoulder, so much so that I heard that his father wanted to cancel the fight with Lopez, and it was Loma who said, no, we're going through with it. So sure, that had to have been playing on his mind, knowing that he wasn't going in 100%, wasn't going in as strong as he wanted to go in with his right hand, his shoulder. It was a problem in the Linares fight, and it got worse for the Lopez fight. So, and then, surgery right after it. So, I think that was easy to explain, but this time, no, they'd held up. There was never the nagging issues. They didn't have to take days off in training. They didn't have to do anything specific in training. No shots, no nothing, so it was good. Like, it was healthy. He was a healthy Loma. A healthy Loma is a dangerous Loma. A healthy, happy, confident Loma is a very dangerous Loma.
All right. And in the first round of this fight against Nakatani, at one point it looked like maybe the health was going to be a concern. He has the big cut that he suffers due to a headbutt at the top of the forehead, a little bit similar to the hockey fans have been tuning into what Brendan Gallagher kind of suffered in his game against the Lightning. But when you go into the corner and you've dealt with major cuts before, you heard the broadcast that one of the, at least Andre Ward, I think, brought it up. The only maybe positive was that it's in the center of the forehead, which is not directly over the eyelids or some other areas that are making it more challenging and difficult, but it's still nevertheless a significant cut that was able to be reduced almost completely for the rest of the fight. When you saw that happen, like, what was your thought process? And in the corner, how did you go about it? Were you concerned at all that you weren't going to be able to get this under control?
cuts above here are always a concern, especially in the hair, because you can't ever dry it. You can't ever dry the cut the way you want to. You know, the head exudes so much heat out of it. You sweat so much out of the top of your head. The hair is wet. You know, you get a cut here, you put the towel on it and squeeze it and wipe it, it's instantly dry. You'll stop sweating. You'll start sweating again as it goes on, but it's not right away instantaneously. There's not a lot of hair that's soaking in and keep absorbing the water and keeping it wet. So that was the first thing I thought about. When he came back to the corner, I was actually doing this in his hair to find out where the cut was, you know, so that I could apply the pressure appropriately, you know, and I dried it best I could, you know, and then got the Q-tip on it, you know, and then crossed my fingers because it's a very difficult place to stop a cut. You can't grab it and squeeze it together and hold it. You know, you can't put the pressure that you would ideally want to put on a cut, you know, because there's just no meat there. It's the skull, right? You're right down into the skull once it opens, and the blood is pumping through the head all the time. I didn't feel at all nervous, and I felt I'm where I'm supposed to be. But you know what I did feel? And this is something that I had never felt before. When I was up there working on it, Egis is sat behind me. You know, he's on the floor in the corner, right? He's behind me. John Hornware, the lawyer, is sat right there with him. Bob Arum is sat right over there. Brad Goodman and Bruce Trampler are sat right beside me. It's like I could feel the eyes of all those people burning me, you know, like I could feel it on it. And I realized at that point that as a cut man, you're only as good as your last performance. And, you know, if I would not have been able to do the job or stop it, and sometimes you can't, like with Badu Jack, when it was split all the way down, there was just nothing to do. When it caught that vein, I mean, look.
Yeah, that was one of the worst ones you've ever had to deal with.
96 stitches. I mean, that's not even, I shouldn't have even had to deal with that. That should have been stopped, you know, and no one would have objected. You know, he was split. You could see to the bone right through his head, okay? When you can't stop it, I mean, nothing happens right there. No one says anything. Everyone taps each other on the back. Maybe you get the win. Maybe you don't. Okay, no problem. But then people start talking. He didn't do a good job. Your cut man didn't do a good job. And everybody's looking for the throat slice right away to get rid of you, you know, like to plant the seed in someone's ear that you didn't do the good job, you know, that they're right there for you. And had I not done it and it would have bled, you know, and been in his face all night or whatever, even if it didn't go in his eye, let's say just pouring down all the time, you know, it gives Nakatani more confidence. Well, all those haters, of course, would have come out as well. And they wouldn't have realized how difficult that kind of cut was. And they'd have said, your guy wasn't good. You know, you got to get another corner man. You got to get another cut man. That's the first time I ever felt that there was that kind of pressure on me, that this was the comeback fight, the statement fight that Loma was supposed to make. And I had to do it right. And thank God, touch wood, you know, I did. So it's a very, it's a strange situation to be in. Now, fairness to them, you know, Egis said, good job, Russ, you know, right in the corner when I did it. So did John Hornware, you know, that was good. They did good job on the cut, Russ, good job on the cut. But had it not been able to stop, who knows where that goes. So I really felt the eyes burning on me, you know.
But it's also validating, it must be, right, that Vasiliy himself acknowledges that as being part of one of the reasons that he was able to continue with his strategy and not be bothered by the fact that he didn't have to deal with blood going down his face for the entire fight, right? That must feel, as a cut man, knowing that no matter what, you know, some nights you're not going to have to deal with that. I don't think you've ever had to with Lomachenko in the past, but you're still, you know, you earn your paycheck that night with that type of performance, right?
Yeah, I guess. And I didn't know that he had said that. Christina Ponchar from Top Rank actually caught me on the way to the press conference and says, oh, Russ, hey, you got a shout out for Loma, not bad, huh? I said, what are you talking about? And she says, yeah, Loma thanked you on air. And I didn't know, you know, I only saw it afterwards that he had did that. And I thanked him for that. And the fight against Mariaga, he took a cut. He took 8 stitches. It was actually a bigger cut than the one on the top of the head. And it got to that easy. No one ever noticed. No one said anything. No one said good job. They didn't even notice it was there. I got to tell you, and I've said this to a few people, but I got to tell you, I think maybe the best compliment came from Buddy McGirt. Buddy told me
who you work with on the undercard as well with his fighter Janibek.
With Janibek, yeah. He told me that Russ, well, my wife called me. His wife Gina calls him and said, "Oh, buddy, Russ did a great job on the cut." And Buddy says, "Gina, what are you talking about, baby?" He says, "I'm sitting right here. There's no cut." No, on television they're talking about it. Russ did a good job with the cut. And Buddy says, "Gina, listen, I'm sat right here. There's no cut." She says, "It was." She says, "Well, how long have you been there, buddy?" He says, "I've been sitting in this seat since the second round." And she said, "Well, it happened in the first." he had missed it and didn't even know there was a cut. So, that's kind of nice, that he did that. So, but yeah, working with him, with Janibek in the opening, in the co-feature was also great. Great performance by Janibek, Alimkhanuly, and Kanuli, I should say. And it was a great fight, great night, and a great weekend in Vegas, brother.
Yeah, and for Vasiliy against Nakatani, with the fight itself, it really seemed at one point, like you mentioned, if Vasiliy had more of that one-punch knockout power, would have been over earlier. Nakatani was tough, taking a lot of punishment like he did. And one thing that impresses me of Loma, and Bradley did a good job, I think, of explaining it also during the broadcast, Timothy Bradley, was that Loma times you with his shoulder, just his shoulder movement, but it's always placed a counter, especially with that left hand from the southpaw position. And it's almost as if you're a fighter, Nakatani. He knew at some point, like he was aware that the left counter shot from the straight left counter was Loma's idea of what he was going to do, but he couldn't do anything about it. The speed is so, and that's why a lot of times people say speed is still a better, more effective weapon than power in the long run, because it's so much tougher to defend against. And Loma's speed did not decline whatsoever. If anybody thought that was going to be an issue, like to me, the counter ability, the upper body movement, it was really subtle. And on the inside, the holding and stuff, like he did well on the inside. Also, I thought Loma in that fight against a bigger guy.
He certainly did. And I'll tell you this, I started to worry about the damage Nakatani was taking, because when he was getting hit, it wasn't just, one of some of these glancing shots.
It was like this.
Right. Bang, he came into the fight at 6 foot. He left 6'2". Bang, they're going out, bang. When he's getting hit, like it was vicious. And when you're that brave and you take that kind of vicious punishment, like I get a lump in my throat sometimes. I think about fighters who have taken that kind of punishment and, not ended up in good results, and I didn't like that feeling that I had, that I thought this was starting to get dangerous into the amount of punishment he's getting hit with, and getting hit with solid. And he's taking it and taking more of it. And he's so brave that he's taking more of it instead of getting knocked out. So it started to worry me. And Loma's speed is great. The way he sets you up is wonderful. I thought Nakatani, and you can look at the fight, I thought Nakatani committed some technical mistakes which caused him to get hit with that shot. I'm not going to reveal what I think they are. I know what they are. But, I think that he made some technical mistakes, and Loma capitalized. And Loma, you can't make mistakes with Loma. You better be a perfect fighter. You better fight a perfect fight if you're going to be in there and have a chance of winning.
100%. So Loma's 33 years old. He's now 15 wins, 11 by way of knockout. He's right back now. Everybody, like you said, who had put him down to number 22 on the pound for pound, they're all back on board the bandwagon after this performance. And he also, Lomachenko, has been very vocal about wanting to get the Lopez rematch. Now, do you think any added satisfaction knowing he did a better job in terms of the official results when people look at the box rec than Teofimo Lopez did against Nakatani? Do you think there's any satisfaction?
That was the whole idea for taking the fight. That was the whole reason.
Now, Lopez afterwards and his team seem to be now open towards the fight, but I want to read you a comment from the manager of Teofimo Lopez that came about this week. And I think it's interesting comments, because the father of Teofimo Lopez Sr. was observed ringside, and he said he's open for his son to do the rematch, provided Lopez defeats Kambosos in their upcoming fight this summer, the mandatory defense for Teofimo Lopez that got delayed due to COVID. And here's the quote for the thought of the manager here. The name is Dave McWater, which I've never heard of Dave McWater outside of Lopez, but he might have managed other fighters.
Dave is a good guy. He has lots of fighters. I've had dinner with him. We've talked like he's a friend. A friend. He's a colleague, if you will. Like I know him. I could pick up the phone right now and say, "Hey, Dave," and he'd know right away it's Russ. And
I should try to get him on next time, then maybe to clarify some of these comments. I don't know if he'd get on with the show because like I don't recall ever hearing of Dave with other fighters, but sometimes some managers are lesser profile than others. Or like you said, I'm sure he has a ton of other fighters. Here's the quote of what he said in regards to the Lomachenko rematch. Quote, "We'll do that fight tomorrow as long as Lomachenko agrees to fight for what we did, 1.35 million. He said, "We took the first fight without a rematch clause and got treated like shit throughout. So Loma can fight us on pay-per-view, take the same money we did, or otherwise go fuck himself," end quote. Pardon the language, but was reading the quote entirely here. Your thoughts when you hear that, though?
Look, I don't know what they mean when they say they were treated like shit. Like I don't know what all that means. I don't know what it means when you say, "Hey, fight me on pay-per-view." I don't know what is that a threat of some kind. I don't know what really that means, a fight me on pay-per-view. I mean, I don't think it.
No, meaning that take the same money, like in terms of guarantee, they want him to take 1.35, which I don't think Loma would agree to. That's his point, right?
Be careful what you think Loma might agree to or not agree to, because Loma's not driven by money. Be careful with that. Loma might say, "No problem." That might not even be an issue. Like threatening Loma with this to me is not a threat. Doesn't care about that. He's got money now. He doesn't care about that. Okay, this is far bigger than just about the money. So and you would have to make it fair. Like you couldn't do a fight in which you're fighting the former undisputed pound for pound king, and to me the undisputed lightweight champion of the world, and offer him $100,000 and you're making 10 million. Like that's just illogical, right? The promotion would never accept that. Top Rank would never accept that. All I can say is this: Dave obviously has to work for his guy, and that's fine. Not sure what the profanity was for about "go fuck himself," because I don't think money was ever really an issue to begin with. Loma and Lopez both made bigger money than they would have made with anybody else, and that still stands today. Loma Lopez is a bigger fight for Teofimo than Teofimo against Josh Taylor for all four belts at 140 pounds. So you have to look at where the money is going to be, who can you do and draw a bigger fight with. So,
but are we making a mistake here also that it's a fait accompli that Teofimo Lopez is going to defeat Kambosos? Am I the only one who thinks it might be it's a more dangerous fight than some think? Because yes, Lopez is the favorite for good reason, but I mean, to me, it's not a done deal that he's just going to walk through Kambosos. But
no, it's not
wrong. I mean, but I look forward to seeing that fight.
No, it's definitely not wrong about you, Matt. Yes, everybody is anticipating a Lopez victory, and Lopez probably will enter the ring as a slight favorite, but certainly, it's a case for me of not counting your chickens before they hatch. So yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, a Kambosos win would throw a wrench into the works, unbelievably, because now Kambosos would have the belts. Kambosos would jump the queue. Loma wants the belt. He gets the belt if he gets the Kambosos fight, because Kambosos makes more money fighting Lomachenko than he would fighting Lopez. If Lomachenko gets the belts back, now he's sitting there with the belts, and Lopez, then Dave McWater has to deal with his quote, they're gonna turn around and say the same thing to him. So look, there's a lot of things that still have to be ironed out for this fight to happen. I even think that Lomachenko would fight Lopez. This is my own personal opinion. I think Lomachenko would fight Lopez even if Lopez didn't have the belt. He would fight him just to prove what he can do against Teofimo Lopez.
So will he be willing to wait then? Because it's possible, according to Lopez's camp, that they don't want to do this fight till next year.
Well, next year, they're talking
early next year,
December, which I mean, it's that technically will be the timeline because of the delay in Lopez's fight with Kambosos. It's going to bring it to, I think, October they're supposed to fight. So, or August or October, they said.
I think it's supposed to be delayed to August. I'll confirm here, but I'm pretty sure it's August.
So I mean, they're supposed to, likely you're not going to be back in the ring 2 months later.
August 14th.
Yeah, so even if they fought August 14th, I can't see them being back in the ring 2 months later in October, so it would go to, so they wouldn't fight in October, but they could possibly fight in December. That would make sense. Take a couple of months off, then go back into training camp for a December fight, maybe January. Then they'll have to look at a TV date and say, no, let's do it on this TV date. So it's going to play somewhere in the 90-day area of December, so it could be December, Jan, Feb, somewhere around there, maybe even late November. Personally, in my opinion, and I was talking, I think it was with, I don't know if it was with Trampler we were talking about this or not, but I mean, wouldn't it be great? Or maybe Egis said this. Wouldn't it be great? I think it was Egis. Wouldn't it be great to make the fight in early December on Bob Arum's 90th birthday?
Yeah, that would be something, because now Lopez, who had left to go, now this fight against Kambosos is going to be on Triller, but apparently they've worked their problems out, and the relationship with Top Rank is still good, and he'd be willing to, of course, to fight for Top Rank and on a Top Rank card going forward. And of course, that would happen if it was a rematch with Loma. And I think the Loma Lopez rematch, based on the Nakatani performance, is bigger now than even the first fight was. Because the first fight was very interesting for a lot of the boxing fan base. But I think now with the Lopez, how much his stock rose for those who maybe didn't know him as much before the Loma fight. And now based on this performance with Loma, there's bad blood. There's a close first fight. I think people would expect this rematch to be much more offensive from the get-go. And I think it's maybe one of the biggest fights in boxing right now outside of the heavyweight division.
And like I said, let's face it, it's the biggest money fight for both of them. They both need each other. Lomachenko needs Lopez because he took his belt. And Lopez needs Lomachenko, or he fights for half the amount, going forward against a next available contender.
Unless he somehow some sort of agreement could come into place with a guy like Ryan Garcia or Tank Davis, which we'll get to in a moment here. Outside of that, for sure, the Loma fight is by far and away, I think, the biggest and most lucrative.
I think Davis, Haney, Garcia, all of those take second place to a rematch with Loma. Maybe not, I said half. I mean, it won't be half, but right. The Lomachenko fight is worth more dollar-wise than any of those three. Those are good fights. No, I'm not saying they're not. They'll make money fights for sure. They won't make more than Lomachenko.
What about Lomachenko? You talked about the fact that he's not motivated by money. Do you think then at what point is this like kind of Lopez, and it's pretty much, do you have any idea of how long he wants to continue essentially his pro career? Or do you think it's a fight-by-fight basis? Do you ever had this conversation? Have any idea of how much Loma wants to continue fighting?
My guess, based on how I know Lomachenko, my guess based on what he did as an amateur, where he hung on for a second Olympic Games, my guess on how he wanted to fight for a world title in his first pro fight, my guess on knowing Lomachenko, the man, and having spent countless hours with him and talked to him as a human, as a human, not just as a fighter, he will do this as long as he's able to do it at the level he knows he can do it at. And that's going to be determined in the gym. I don't believe he's going to be one of those guys that's going to stay around past his sell-by date. I think when he sees that he can no longer do it in the gym and he cannot perform, and if the body starts to break down, I think he'll call it a night. And if that's still good at 45 and he's still the same guy that you saw last Sunday, he'll still be fighting. So that's how I feel about him. As long as he can still make you miss and hit you and do what he wants in the ring and perform the way Loma can perform, but not just perform, train the way he wants to train in that animalistic fashion that he trains in. When he can no longer do that, that's when I think he'll call it a career. As long as he can do that, he's going to continue to fight because he's good at it and he loves it.
Fair enough. And I think for the fans, they really enjoy, I think the language barrier over the years he's getting much better at communicating in English. And I think that draws more fans, at least in North America, of course, towards him. And he's an exceptional athlete and also never been in any controversy outside the ring as well, which is not always the case, of course, with some of these professional fighters. So more credit to him by being a great professional inside and out of the ring. So look, we can't wait to see Loma, and hopefully the Lopez rematch does happen or a major bout in the future. I want to get to Tank Davis, who impressed many in Atlanta. I don't know how much. Did you get to see any of the fight afterwards, or some of you saw highlights here and there?
Highlights. I only saw the highlights. I understand that Barrios put up a good fight, and that Tank looked really good. He looked strong again, which we know he is. He looked powerful again, which we know he is. He brought that power up to 140. So That's you can't do anything but compliment the guy on a job well done. He did what he's supposed to do. I'm not buying into the belt thing, but he did it.
That. We'll get to that in a second. But if you did last weekend wager on Bet99, there was a lot of good results possibly, and of course the over in the rounds for Davis and Barrios ended up being a good winner, Russ. So you know where I'm going with this, correct?
I do know where you're going, and Bet99, as we've discussed in the past, and if you'd have put some money down, they'd have matched your bet up to $600, right? They'd have matched your bet up to $600 if you were right. So you'd have doubled, up to 600. You got 1,200 max if you use the code Boxing99, and
that's right. So let me do the rest of it though, because that's a very good part there, Russ.
But I do the best part of it. You see, that's the best part of it. You see, that's the most important part, is that it's like a 2-for-1. You bet 600, but you could win 12 if you're right. They'll help you. They'll help you with the bet. How can you go wrong with that?
As long as you use the code Boxing99. So be sure to check out Bet99.com. They're Canada's newest online sportsbook and casino. You can check out their player props, their bet builders, their risk-free live bet bonuses. And as Russ has mentioned, of course, if you use the code Boxing99, they get a sports welcome offer. So it's a deposit match of 100% up to $600. You can apply it to MMA bouts, boxing bouts, or other sporting events. So be sure to check them out. Quieter on the front of this upcoming weekend, but always some fights nevertheless. And the Tank Davis fight over the past weekend against Barrios, what ended up being impressive to me is also the ability I've noticed recently of Davis is, I think, a draw. I don't know what the exact pay-per-view numbers are going to be at the time when we record this. I haven't seen any official numbers be published for this pay-per-view bout on Showtime, but the crowd was very loud in Atlanta, and he seems to be delivering that. We know Mayweather, Floyd is always been kind of around Tank Davis and promoting him and being, part of a big brother, if you will, in some sense, a mentor for Tank Davis, but he's been delivering inside the ring, Davis, compared to Mayweather, the finishing touch. At one point, Mayweather in the rounds, when they were back in the corner, he intervenes and says, "Hey, by the way, you're down on Steve Farhood's unofficial scorecard." And Tank Davis goes, "What? Really? Yeah, you're down." And Tank Davis puts on a show, put on a bit more acceleration. It seems that his power now is carrying into the later rounds, which is always something you want to see in a prospect who knocks guys out early. Will the power match? And 24 knockouts in 25 fights, I think the power is definitely legitimate at 140. But what do you think about the fact that he did go up to 140 against Barrios? Like, how much stock do you put into his opponent being a tough, credible fighter, but not somebody who had the pedigree, of having defeated numerous world champions prior to facing Tank Davis?
It's all part of how they like to move their fighters, and at Mayweather, how they like to move their guys and navigate the waters. He's been world champion for how long now, and has yet
Davis at 130, even though I think he missed the scales at one point, right? That's his outside the ring work ethic has always kind of been the issue, I think, not the talent inside the ring.
No, but I'm saying I remember, because Scully and I spoke about this on numerous occasions, that he won a world title, and one of the quotes from Floyd was that, "Oh, he needs time to develop." Well, once you've won a world title, there's no more time. You're not into development time. You're in world title time.
Yeah.
And these guys grab titles and sit on them, and pick their opponents that they want to fight and navigate and go through the politics. So, but I mean, there's no denying his talent. I mean, clearly the guy can fight. He can punch. I'm not sure. Where do you want to live? Do you want to live at 130? Do you want to live at 135? Do you want to live at 140? We haven't really been given a definitive.
Well, I think 130 is probably done with. I would think, especially considering he's always had a bit of issues at the scales.
I agree.
135 is the money division at the moment to an extent, and I think he'll probably go 135 if he can get the Ryan Garcia fight, if he stays at 140 and maybe gets another big name. But the one thing I want to bring up, we'll get to also Davis a little bit, but in perspective of people calling him a champion at 140 pounds, it gets a bit out of hand, right? When Josh Taylor just earned the right to be recognized as the universal, undisputed 140 pound, he had a tough fight, earned the win against Jose Ramirez, who's a lot, I don't want to disrespect Barrios, but Jose Ramirez is a lot more of a bigger, pedigree fighter brought into the ring against Josh Taylor than Barrios was for Davis. And Taylor is the undisputed champion, and yet some people now, again, will get confused with the amount of belts that are handed out. They think Tank Davis is a world champion at 140, when theoretically same as Devin Haney at 135. I think there's a bit of an asterisk when it comes to those belts.
A bit of an asterisk? The asterisk is this big, okay? It's a big asterisk. Like, it's almost to the point of insanity that it's allowed to even happen. And I know that, they were talking about him being champion in 3 weight classes and comparing him to Henry Armstrong. The insanity of that, the ludicrousy of that is insulting to Henry Armstrong. It's insulting to multiple division champions when the same way that, and this, I don't blame Devin Haney for this. Just the fact that it was done by whatever business or politics was done, how you take away Loma's title, which he just won from Luke Campbell, how you take away that title and award it to Devin Haney. I mean, Devin had nothing to do with this. He's an innocent bystander in this thing. He brought it to me. I probably said, I don't want it. Don't even give me that belt. Just leave it with Loma. I'm still going to be the fighter I am with or without that belt. Makes no difference. But for some reason, they like this collection of trophies. They like to collect these things, and say, I won this belt. I won that belt. And because of such mass confusion among the public, nobody knows. So you just have to fool a certain amount of people into thinking that, you're the champion in that weight class. And people say, yeah, he's the world champion. They don't know any better. They don't even know who Josh Taylor is. They don't even know. So they just think Tank Davis is the 140-pound champion because they don't know who Josh Taylor is. That's how bad it's gotten. Unless you're a hardcore fight fan to know all this and realize the ludicrousy in all this, they don't know. They don't care. They say, and the new champion. I've seen a fight where they have it for the WBC silver or interim title, and they get, and the new interim world champion. You don't hear interim. It's very quick. Interim world champion. And then they raise a belt and they put it around them and take the pictures. And it has to stop. It has to stop. It's watered down so ridiculously. And again, I'm not blaming the WBC. I'm not blaming the WBA. They are merely fulfilling a demand which is asked for by fighters, managers, and promoters. They're fulfilling the demand. Hey, can we get a belt? We want to make this fight for a belt.
Well, networks probably.
And networks. So they find a way to fulfill a belt. They make a belt. They make you a trophy. Basically, that's all they're doing is they make you another trophy for you to fight for. And they don't care the legitimacy of it. All they do is want to use it as a marketing tool to say that that's what they're fighting for. And then the fight gets announced because then it's official that you can say, this is for the silver belt. This is for the regular belt. This is, you're allowed to say for the regular world championship, like they put, that's kind of like it's a little bit sickening, it's a little bit sickening that this happens, and it takes away from the accomplishments and achievements of great fighters who have won great fights to win great belts, legitimate belts. And, as Loma has said, despite all, any bad feeling that might exist between him and Lopez, he is one of the staunchest defenders of Lopez, in that Lopez should be recognized as the undisputed champion of the world, lightweight champion of the world. And we should be bragging about that in boxing, that in this day and age, we're able to unify a title and somebody can become undisputed. So just a couple of short weeks ago, Josh Taylor, what's it been? Maybe a month now. Josh Taylor becomes undisputed. Undisputed. That was the thing. Well, how can a month later you have Tank Davis at 140-pound champion? I'm in the game 42 years. I can't even explain it to you. It makes no sense.
And in terms of where Gervonta Davis is going to fight next, the big fight people, of course, want to see in Ryan Garcia. A few days ago on social media, he's been, of course, we know, a bit quiet. He said he had needed time for taking care of some mental health issues, declined to fight this summer, but says he wants to have the fight against Tank Davis. They had a lot of talk in the past between the two. They're both probably the two best up-and-coming stars in the sport of boxing, especially if you consider lower weight classes. A Ryan Garcia, Tank Davis fight on paper right now, let's say we'll just speculate because of course it's not anywhere clear, close to being confirmed at the moment. But if it were to happen at 135, with the performance I saw from Tank Davis this past weekend, I find it very hard to believe he would lose against Ryan Garcia. I don't see how anybody's going to beat Tank Davis with the type of style Garcia, which is more of an offensive style. And I think when you look at Davis, he seems to be very good at counterpunching guys who come after him. And Ryan Garcia is more of an aggressor. And all credit to him, even when he got dropped by Luke Campbell, he gets back up, he still pursues the fight, tries to win by knockout. So, of course, it makes sense. It would be a massive fight, which is why I have some doubts that they'll be able to come to an agreement. But on paper, I don't see Tank Davis losing this fight. Your thoughts? Do you even want to speculate as to who could win that fight if you just look at both matchups?
I don't count Ryan Garcia out of this one at all. I think he can fight his ass off. Maybe you want to say Tank would be the favorite. Okay, but styles make fights, and I think Garcia has the boxing skill. I definitely think he has the speed, and he definitely has the power that could give Tank all kinds of nightmares. Again, I keep using this word, and I'm trying to help me find another word for it. I need a thesaurus, but it's insane that Haney, Garcia, and Tank Davis are not already in some kind of trilogy situation. It's crazy that they're not fighting each other. This is where you make your money. This is what these are super fights that should be made. This is where stars fight stars. This is what's supposed to happen. But it seems like we've entered an era of boxing where everyone says, I'm staying in my lane. I'm fighting my guy. You do what you want. They don't care. Oblivious.
Because you can still make money doing that.
Huh?
You can still make money. That's why they're doing it.
That's right. They're taking the easy road. It's a little downhill slope, little glide, nice and easy. Oh, they don't want no uphill. They don't want no gravel. They don't want anything difficult. They're not fighting for that kind of stuff. But it's crazy that the talent-laden lightweight division is not filled. Esteban de Jesus and Roberto Duran fought each other 3 times. It's crazy. It doesn't make sense. It's why aren't you fighting each other? You're supposed to have trilogies between you. You're supposed to have 9 fights between you. It doesn't make sense that it's not happening. I don't understand boxing anymore. I don't understand the business of boxing. I don't understand why fights are put together this way, why they're not fighting each other. I don't get it. Why you're not nurturing those fights. The only way that those fights don't get a rematch is if somebody's blown out. And if they are blown out, they could get a rematch. It doesn't make sense that you have such a talent-laden division and you don't have great fights coming out of it besides Lopez and Lomachenko. That's it.
And Lomachenko, you mentioned it previously. I think he's backed it up by showing that it's not about the money, because he could have taken a lot more easier fights. Even the Nakatani fight, he didn't have to take an opponent that difficult coming off his first loss in a long time. So clearly there has to be, I'm not always buying that all their hands are tied. They can't know. A lot of the fighters themselves really can push whether or not this is the legacy they want or whether or not they're happy with the money and still the results. And look, I can understand it from both angles. I do. But I think that at one point in time, because maybe when boxing had more media focus mainstream and not just the journalists that cover boxing, but I think there's maybe more pressure in the past that legacy matter, where like you had to have the best fight the best, which now I think because it's just comes and goes, the attention and the focus, there's not as much pressure as you mentioned, because it's so hard to keep up with the belts and everything. There's less of that pressure to make those big fights where at least the fighters goes, I want to prove to myself that I'm the best. And credit when it happens, when a guy like Josh Taylor agrees to fight Jose Ramirez, there are some of that still goes on, but just not nearly enough as there had been in the past, especially in the 70s, 80s, and before.
I don't know what's going to be done to change it, Matt, but I'm sickened by the fact that we have this talent and you're not getting the fights you want. It's sickening that that Tank even had to go to 140. Nobody cared that he went to 140. No one asked you to go to 140. There's plenty of work for you at 35.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen. So
Well, anyway, so look, I have a few on the closing statement, if you will, or final take here. I have some synonyms for insanity, okay? So we have absurdity, craziness, folly, lunacy, madness. So those are some that you can keep in mind.
Keep that in mind. Make a note of those, and let's keep.
I'm sure we'll have to use those words going forward when we come to the sport we love, right? as Larry Merchant once said, nothing can save it, nothing can kill it. It is what it is.
It is a good line.
It's a pretty good line. Any final, listen, the rest are almost approaching again the hour mark, but any final thoughts as Loma, you're back now, Janibek, good fights, and some big fights, of course, for the rest of the summer, but any final thoughts for this week's podcast?
My final thought is what I took out of my visit and my time in both California with Janibek in training camp, with Loma in training camp, with Buddy McGirt, with Lomachenko and the team, and then the week in Vegas. It felt good to be back with the pros. It felt good to be back with the people. It felt good to be back doing boxing like we really did it. And, I thought about this, that had I been forced to wear the mask in the corner again, how difficult a job it would have been to work on the cut, because I couldn't put the Q-tip in my mouth and then get it out and put it back in my mouth the way I wanted to, so that you can access it. And I thought about that, and it felt good to be there doing that, and feeling like there's some sort of normalcy that we've come back to. It's been a long time, and it felt good that it happened again. And it felt good to be in the corner and to be part of, Lomachenko, and to be part of a fight, what I've dreamed about my whole life, of being involved in great fights. And I looked at Lomachenko, and like you just said, he didn't have to take Nakatani. And here's a guy who wanted to. He picked Nakatani as the guy. Who picks a guy like that? Only great fighters. And I wish that example would be followed by the other talented fighters in the lightweight division and in all of boxing. You want to pick the best you can. And I remember when Davey Moore, I don't know if Davey Moore had 8 or 9 fights. He was champion of the world. They put him in with Roberto Duran, and he was a favorite against Duran, and Duran beat him. He's the champion of the world, and he had to fight Roberto Duran. And, that's part of what it means to be a world champion. Duran beat him, but he fought Roberto Duran. And that's the way boxing works. That's the way it should work. The best win by fighting the best.
Enough said, Russ. It was a pleasure doing this again. We'll be back on next week. Maybe some guests also coming forward to the summertime. We may be able even to do this, Russ, shortly in a non-Zoom setting. To be continued, but this is something that we'll be exploring as the COVID, where everybody's winding up, do doses, summertime, green zones, whatever the case may be. So fortunately, we've been enjoying the Zoom, but we may be able to bring this in a live setting in the near future.
Have you worked on getting us those mic flashes? I want the mic flash, that's calling Russ Anber, big square that we put on here. Work on that.
I don't know what you mean. The mic identifiers there that you see. Yeah, we're working on it. It's part of a long list of items to continue, but we thank you again, everyone, for tuning in for another edition of Calling Russ Anber, of course, and happy Canada Day as we're recording this for those of you in Canada. Happy Independence Day and 4th of July for the Americans who will be tuning in the next few days, and we'll be back next week, of course, for another edition of Calling Russ Anber. Take care.
Thanks, brother. It's been a good one. It's been great. It was good to be back.